Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, we take a look at early voting in a key battleground state, plus where the focus is for the candidates today. And a surprise court case with huge consequences for veterans. How a ruling could impact if and how they get benefits.
And we have some advisories going in effect tonight. We'll plot everything out in a few minutes.
Dedicated to Southern and Eastern Kentucky, this is WYMT Mountain News at 5:30.
Good evening, I'm Steve Hensley. Voting is getting underway in a key battleground state. On the same day, a judge delivers a ruling that could ensure the vote gets certified on time. Meanwhile, former President Trump is talking foreign policy, while the Harris campaign focuses on black and rural voters. CBS's Natalie Brand has the latest campaign news from the White House.
Elections officials in Georgia are predicting record-breaking turnout for the first day of early voting in the battleground state.
This is a very important election, and so I think mostly everybody will be out here trying to cast their votes.
A state judge ruled today in a case brought by Republican local election board members that they cannot refuse to certify election results. The judge saying Georgia voters would be silenced. Our Constitution and our election code do not allow for that to happen. Former President Donald Trump is holding back-to-back events in Georgia this evening, a state he lost by fewer than 12,000 votes in 2020. Trump also sat for questions Tuesday with Bloomberg and the Economic Club of Chicago, where he was pressed on his proposal for tariffs.
If you don't do this, this country has no chance.
40 million jobs is a lot of jobs to rely on.
They're all coming back.
Trump was also asked if he has spoken to Russian President Vladimir Putin since leaving the White House.
I don't comment on that, but I will tell you that if I did, it's a smart thing.
Vice President Kamala Harris campaigned in Detroit, continuing her outreach to black voters, particularly men, and meeting with black business owners.
21 days. 21 days, and early voting starts in 4 days here.
Her running mate, Tim Walz, is visiting a farm in Pennsylvania, rolling out policy proposals aimed at rural communities, including increasing health care resources.
They don't respect rural communities. And I'll tell you what, they take a hell of a lot of their voters for granted by the policies they put out that don't do a damn thing for rural Pennsylvania or rural Minnesota or any place in this country.
Trump carried rural voters by a margin of nearly 2-1 in 2020. Natalie Brand, CBS News, the White House.
The Harris-Walz campaign announced that Governor Tim Walz will campaign with former President Bill Clinton during the first day of early voting in North Carolina on Thursday. And ABC is reporting he will also rally with former President Barack Obama for the first day of early voting in Wisconsin next week. And we want to remind you that the opportunity to vote before Election Day in Kentucky will get underway here pretty soon. In-person excused absentee voting runs from October 23rd through the 25th and again from October 28th through the 30th. Early in-person no excuse absentee voting takes place on October 31st and that runs through November 2nd. If you want to know about where you can go to vote early, you can go to the Secretary of State's website at sos.ky.gov. A London man has been arrested on charges related to child sexual abuse material. The arrest of Logan Barber was the result of an ICAC investigation. That investigation was launched after police say it was discovered Barber had been sharing images of child sexual exploitation online. Barber is charged with 41 counts of distribution of matter portraying sexual performances by a minor under the age of 12. He was taken to the Laurel County Correctional Center. Jury selection is underway in the federal retrial of a former Louisville police officer charged in the shooting death of Breonna Taylor. Prosecutors say Brett Hankison used excessive force and violated Taylor's civil rights when he fired shots into her apartment in 2020 during a botched police raid. The federal case was tried last year, but when the trial ended, the jury was deadlocked and the judge ordered a mistrial. The House Judiciary Committee is having a closed-door deposition with a former Fulton County, Georgia special prosecutor. The committee is questioning Nathan Wade as part of its investigation into the office of Fulton County District Attorney Fonnie Willis. Lawmakers are looking at whether Willis's prosecution of Donald Trump for election subversion was politically motivated. Willis denies the claim. North Carolina's GOP gubernatorial candidate Mark Robinson has filed a defamation lawsuit against CNN. The lieutenant governor says the network defamed him when it claimed he made inflammatory and racist remarks on a porn website. Robinson has denied making the comments and accuses CNN of political motivation. Robinson is seeking $50 million in damages. Veteran benefits are front and center of a consequential Supreme Court case this week. As WYMT Washington correspondent Molly Martinez reports, it revolves around PTSD, an invisible injury that can often be hard to prove.
According to the Department of Veterans Affairs, there are about 1 million backlog disability cases as of June 2024. Each one of those cases is reviewed by a processor who determines whether or not that veteran is entitled to a payout. Now, 2 of those cases revolving around PTSD made it all the way to the Supreme Court. Injuries sustained on the battlefield aren't always visible. According to the Veterans Administration, in 2021, about 11% of veterans were diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. By some VA estimations, 30% of Vietnam War veterans experienced PTSD.
There is still a stigma in our society to kind of acknowledge that you are dealing with mental health problems.
Attorneys Mel Bostwick and Renee Burbank have worked on this week's Supreme Court case. It centers around 2 veterans who say they suffer with PTSD stemming from their service, but were denied benefits.
They have to prove that they have this disability and that it's caused by service. And that can be really difficult.
Unlike criminal law, which operates under beyond a reasonable doubt, or civil law, which goes by preponderance of the evidence, veterans law uses something called benefit of the doubt.
When there's evidence on both sides and it's roughly equal, the tie goes to the veteran.
That means if there's any question as to the legitimacy of the claim, the veteran should still get the payout. Attorney Katie Becker says this case throws that system into question.
Whatever this decision is, it's going to have huge ramifications.
Oral arguments in this case will be heard Wednesday, with a decision expected by June. At the Supreme Court, I'm Molly Martinez.
All right, we have advisories on the map at this hour. They will start later on this evening. We do have a freeze warning in effect for Lawrence County. This starts tonight at 11 and goes until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. Now, everybody else in this blue shading is under a frost advisory. Again, starts later on this evening and goes until 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, as we'll see our first frost of the season. It is raining here in Hazard. We do need the rain for a little bit. We're sitting well below normal for the month. We're seeing temperatures right now in the 40s across the majority of the viewing area. Pikeville's at 44, 45 is the current temperature in Prestonsburg, 48 in Williamsburg, 49 Middlesboro. Monticello, the warm spot on the map, if you will, checking in with 50 degrees. There's live pinpoint Doppler radar, and you can see some rain pushing through eastern Kentucky, and this will be the trend as we go throughout the next several hours. We will clear out as we go throughout the late evening into the overnight hours, but look at the temperatures in the upper 30s and low 40s as we go throughout the overnight hours. And when you wake up in the morning, temperatures in the 30s, even upper 20s will greet you. 28 in Irvine, 28 Manchester, 30 in Somerset, 32 Pikeville, Hazard, and Jackson, making it to 35 degrees. But this is not a long-term system. We are going to warm back up, and I'll tell you when in the first alert forecast in a few minutes. Steve.
Eric, thank you. Cleanup efforts continue in the aftermath of Hurricane Milton. At least 24 people have been killed as a result of that hurricane. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis provided an update to those in Florida earlier today, discussing power outage restorations as well as fuel deliveries. At last check, there are still more than 100,000 folks in the state without power. As FEMA continues to respond to Hurricanes Helene and Milton, an agency spokesperson says it has roughly $8.5 billion in its disaster relief fund. Despite the relatively low balance, the spokesperson says FEMA has the funding it needs to continue recovery efforts from both hurricanes. The balance is also a reflection of how it's been a year of non-stop disasters filled with tornadoes, wildfires, and floods. Our parent company, Great Media, is teaming up with the Salvation Army for hurricane relief efforts. You can make a financial donation by going to floridastormrelief.org. Just scan the QR code on your screen and you'll be directed to the right website to donate to the Salvation Army. Federal officials are taking a closer look at how U.S. Agriculture Department and state inspectors handled the deadly listeria outbreak at Boar's Head Deli meat plant in Virginia. The USDA has launched an internal investigation into how the agency responded to reports of serious violations at a Boar's Head plant in Jarrett, Virginia. At least 10 people died and nearly 50 were hospitalized after a listeria outbreak linked to Boar's Head Deli meats, including liverwurst.
These deaths and hospitalizations were preventable, and they should have been preventable. I want to get to the bottom of why the Boar's Head plant was permitted to continue operating in the face of repeated violations.
Senator Richard Blumenthal declined to release the USDA's response. The plant is now closed and Boar's Head no longer produces liverwurst anywhere. This Saturday is National Move Over Day, a day to remind drivers about recent changes to the Slow Down, Move Over law. This summer, the law expanded to include any disabled vehicle with its warning signals on. AAA of the Bluegrass says that nationally, approximately one driver every 6 days dies from being hit by a car on the road during work. Tow truck driver Jacob Nash says he feels strongly about not becoming that statistic.
People that don't want to move over, be ashamed of yourself. People's got lives and they've got families at home. They don't want to be called in the middle of the night saying, hey, somebody's just got run over by a car.
If moving over is impossible, drivers must reduce their speed when approaching disabled vehicles. Coming up on Mountain News at 5:30, financial experts say if you're going to invest in something, know your why, how to think about those long-term investments.
And live pinpoint Doppler radar is showing some rain pushing through eastern Kentucky. We'll time everything else future view in a few minutes. Stay with us.